Namaste, everyone. My name is Vaibhavi Haridas, and I'm here to talk about Yoga and Vedanta. What's the connection? I am teacher and founder of arvayoga.org, and the three things I'm going to talk about today are definitions of Yoga and Vedanta, the origins of Yoga and Vedanta, and the connection between the two, the way I see them. I have in other videos given more background and introduction about who I am and why these two topics in particular are of interest. This is a very short video, and we are only going to skim the surface of these very deep topics. Hopefully, this video helps spark a little bit of interest and a little bit of curiosity so that you possibly start to research these topics yourself, or B, come take a class on arvayoga.org and let's do some wellness for mind, body, and soul together. So let's get started. What are the definitions of Vedanta and yoga? Well, Britannica defines yoga as union, which is right because in Sanskrit it actually means yoking. It's one of the six systems of Indian philosophy. And the basic text that's quoted is Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is written right around somewhere between the 2nd century BC or the 5th century CE. We are going to talk a little bit about the timeline during this talk. Vedanta, on the other hand, is one of the other uh, philosophical branches. And in Sanskrit, it really means end of the Vedas. And what's the end of the Vedas? It's the culmination of all the knowledge of the Vedas, and it really applies to the Upanishads. So, we're going to talk a little bit about Upanishads also as we move forward during this talk. So, Yoga and Vedanta, the definitions are pretty straightforward. The one thing that you'll see common between the two definitions is that they both belong to the six systems of Indian philosophy, which then you might start thinking, what are the six systems of Hindu philosophy or Indian philosophy? And wait a minute, is yoga then Hinduism based? So let's debunk some of those other things. Origins of yoga and Vedanta. So, like we said before, both yoga and Vedanta are one of the six branches of Hindu philosophy. The six are shown in big blue boxes for you to read. Now, yoga and Vedanta happen to be two most popular today. Before we talk about yoga and Vedanta in detail, Sankhya is more mathematical. It appeals to the intellectual mind. Vaisheshika is experimental and appeals to the sensorial amongst us. Nyaya is logical and Mimamsa is theological in its nature. So this talk is not about those four, it's about yoga and Vedanta. Yoga is really identification based and has the concepts of mind control from a philosophical standpoint, and Vedanta is more metaphysical and abstraction based explanation of the Hindu philosophy. Now, Vedanta abstracts the ultimate truth, whereas yoga lets you experience the same truth from the practical standpoint. And what are these truths we are talking about? These truths are nothing but ways of realizing that higher self, realizing that you are not a limited individual, and the fact that you're really one with that omnipresent, omniscient, super powerful being that we call by many names. God, maybe one of the names, Brahman, used by Hindu philosophy a lot. So, six branches, of which yoga and Vedanta are two very different uh, paths, if you will, to reach the same mountain top. Now that we have talked about the Hindu philosophy, I think I might just make one comment here. What I did not talk about on the previous slide is what's Hinduism? Is it a philosophy? Is it a religion? Well, that's a topic for another talk. But for the purpose of this talk, the philosophical aspects of Hinduism are explaining to us the means of self realization without a religious connotation to it, if that makes sense. All right. So, ancient texts and timeline of events. Why is this important? Now, given we have talked about Vedanta and yoga as being two different paths, I wanted to showcase my understanding of the evolution of yoga the way we understand it today. And in order to do that, let's take a look at the timeline. Again, this topic will be covered in a future talk in detail, but let's quickly take a view down the timeline. So, Vedas are four, these are ancient texts and sacred to the Hindu philosophy. These are written in Sanskrit and they are dated to 1200 BC or older. So today we are in 2021, so we are talking about texts that are more than 3000 years old. Like I said, the Vedas and all the knowledge within it is is kind of expounded in Upanishads. And there are 200 Upanishads. 10 of them are considered as major Upanishads, and these can be dated to 400 BC. Now, Yoga Sutra of Patanjali is attributed to one sage called Patanjali. And again, there are several schools of thoughts on whether this was one individual or not. But the one thing that we do know is right around the time that Christ was born, or a few hundred years before or after that, is when Yoga Sutra of Patanjali was written. Now, the very interesting thing to note about this is as we look at the timeline, it's the same philosophical concept that is now being expounded and explained by others and detailed in different texts. So, this is the same time when one might say Buddha and Patanjali were contemporaries. Yes. So, now that we are right at the turn of AD and BC, right around the time Christ was born. Now let's fast forward a few more or hundreds of years fast forward. We are talking about 1400 AD, and this is where the Hatha Yoga Pradipika was published. Now, this is where we start talking a little bit more about um, the asanas, the sun and the moon, focus more on the body from from a philosophy now to actual physical body. That's the shift we start to see. In 1893, when Swami Vivekanand addressed in Chicago, that was probably one of the pivotal milestone moments for Western, I guess, the West to realize some of these interesting concepts from the East. And that's where yoga popularity started growing in the West. So from that point to 1940 onward, really there was an influx of teachers who explained the concepts that are detailed out in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, going back to the philosophy expounded by Patanjali in Yoga Sutra, which in turn goes back to the Vedas and Upanishads. So, again, if you look at the timeline, we are talking about almost 3,000-year old yoga philosophy or Vedanta philosophy. Now, I ask myself two questions on this timeline. What was lost in this evolution? And what are the benefits of the fact that yoga is gaining popularity today? Well, what was lost is the fact that yoga is so much more than just the physical movement of the body. Today, if we look at yoga classes and we take the whole philosophical aspect out of it, you are left with a class that is physical exercise without the rich benefits of so much more that the ancient texts have provided us in terms of tools to calm the mind. And isn't that the need of the hour today? So, something was certainly lost in this evolution. And what is it that we are gaining now from the popularity of yoga? I think as people start learning more, and in some cases, you might call yourself Hindu, but do you really know what Hinduism means or the origins of Hinduism? So I think the benefits of popularity are questioning, starting to think, and understand why certain things were were proposed to be the way they were. And I think the science behind the text is what we will gain with this increasing popularity. What's the relationship between Vedanta and yoga? Now, this is where I kind of look at it from a top down, bottom up approach. I'm going to move myself down here. So, Vedanta is the end of Vedas. It talks about oneness in all, and it is there are multiple paths of multiple types of Vedanta understanding. Let's just say that there is non-duality, which is called as Advaita Vedanta, duality, which is Dvaita Vedanta, and Vishesha Advaita, that individual is part of one. Regardless, Vedanta as a philosophy, if you look at it, it really starts by asking that question, who are you? And debunking the myths in order to get to who you truly are. Yoga, on the other hand, starts from gross physical body and takes us inward, one aspect of our personality at a time, the concept of sheets. And as a result, helps us understand how you are the one. Now, in my head, the top down approach depicted by this inverted triangle and bottom up approach depicted by this vertical triangle, when you superimpose these two, you get the star symbol, the tantric symbol of the star, also found in other religions like the Star of David. And the way I understand these two philosophies, and I'm a big fan of both of them, is the fact that microcosm, macrocosm, superimposed on top of each other, at the core is that one, is that Brahman. It is that supreme consciousness that we are all driven by. And that's my interpretation of Vedanta and yoga. The fact that both philosophies emphasize principles of right living in order to merge our own lower personality with the higher self, and to realize that we are not our body, we are not our mind, but that infinite reality that pervades the entire universe. Through my social yoga project, Arva Yoga, I'm hoping to share both yoga as well as Vedanta philosophical concepts so that we all as a society can become more healthy by focusing on our body, calm our minds, and become a better human being. So, with that, I will end the talk, and I hope that you all got a little quick glimpse of the two fundamental and very popular paths of Hindu philosophy called Vedanta and yoga. And the next time you take a yoga class, do ask yourself a question. How is this different than other forms of exercise? And am I getting that mental peace? Am I becoming a better individual by taking this class? And I'm sure the answer will be yes. I hope to see you soon. Visit arvayoga.org to learn more about this initiative. Namaste.